Awareness, the final frontier. This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, fellow explorers, to Awareness Explorers. Good to have you back. I'm excited about this episode where we'll be interviewing a friend and fellow meditation teacher, Greg Hamilton. But before I introduce him, I want to say hi to Brian. How you doing?
Very well, Jonathan. How are you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. You know, a lot of times you know a lot about the teachers that we interview, and I know their bio. Now we've reversed roles. I know a lot about Craig. I've taken a couple of his courses. We're becoming good friends, and you're new to him, so we'll reverse roles. But let me tell our listeners about Craig Hamilton in case they don't know. Craig is a spiritual trailblazer whose approach to transformation is bringing enlightenment down to earth and unlocking the codes to our highest potential. He has more than 16,000 graduates to date in his meditation courses, and he's transformed the lives of seekers in over 85 countries. Craig is a former senior editor of What is Enlightenment magazine. He's a founding member of Ken Wilber's Integral Institute and a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Forum. We could go on and on about Craig, but I just want to welcome you to Awareness Explorers, and I'm looking forward to this interview. How are you doing, Craig?
Doing great, and thank you for having me on your show. I think it's a fantastic show, and I love the format of the two of you in dialogue together. So looking forward to going somewhere that none of us have gone yet, and hopefully unlocking some new insights and
where no person has gone before. Anyway,
well, at least the three of us maybe haven't together.
I'm going to do something different, which is let you ask the first question, Brian, because you can follow your curiosity. I know a lot about Craig's stuff, and I'll mention some of the value I've gotten from his courses. But what strikes you first?
Well, you wrote in your book, which I believe is called, one of your ebooks is the Unlocking the Power of Meditation, which I really, really enjoyed. And you said that a lot of people get meditation wrong. A lot of people have a lot of mistakes about the idea about it. And not only that, you wrote this quote, which I found fascinating. You said, "I'll be the first to acknowledge that what I'm pointing to is an utterly radical proposition. Indeed, this practice runs counter to just about every human instinct we have." And so what is it about what we think about meditation that we get so wrong?
Well, thanks for that question, and it's a big. There's a lot of subtlety and nuance in that because, you know, the interesting thing about our moment in history is just how many people are starting to meditate and how many people are teaching meditation, and sort of the diverse, to be a little euphemistic, the diverse level of development, capacity, and practice of the people teaching it, right? You know, like in ancient times, to be a respected teacher of a spiritual practice, you went through all kinds of training, all kinds of vetting, all kinds of sort of what we would today call certification, but, you know, sort of the endorsement of the lineage, the deep practice. And once you had been sort of anointed as somebody worthy of teaching because you had gained the insights that the practice was supposed to lead you to, then you could become a teacher and people would then respect you because you had all that credential. Now, what does it take to be a meditation teacher? You know, some good marketing, some good online marketing skills or what, you know, I took a class in meditation. I took a mindfulness course and now I think it's great. So I'm going to teach it. So on the, you know, we can be critical about that. I am critical about that from a certain perspectives, but it's also helping make these kinds of practices available everywhere. You know, you can go into a yoga studio in rural Nebraska in a little town, and someone's going to guide you in a little meditation at the end of the yoga practice or the beginning. And, you know, it's so this is helping with the proliferation of spiritual practice and consciousness development. What's also happening now, though, is meditation means a million things. And you know, in a sense, it's sort of, you know, when someone says, "Oh, I meditate," nowadays it's a bit like saying, "I exercise." Like, okay, you exercise. Well, what does that mean for you? For me, it means I do strength training and I do some certain cardio training for certain sports I do. You know, for someone else, exercises, I do some yoga. For someone else, they run, et cetera. Well, meditation's kind of just like that now. And you could argue it was always a bit like that because there were a lot of different meditation teachings historically. But nowadays, you know, some people are just meditating with an app on their phone to help calm them down and get their stress levels down. Someone else is meditating because they think it's going to help make them more focused and creative. Someone else less reactive. And someone else is a passionate spiritual practitioner seeking spiritual enlightenment who's read about it, maybe met a powerful teacher who really woke something up in them that they're now avidly pursuing in this quest to awaken beyond their ego structure and discover who they are beyond the mind and realize this pearl beyond price that we've been hearing about for thousands of years, this extraordinary possibility of spiritual illumination. Now, all those people meditate, and they're probably doing very different things, a lot of different things when they meditate. I'm just saying all this by way of context, because for me to come in and say, well, most people are getting meditation wrong. Well, I have to preface that to say, in the context of spiritual awakening and the pursuit of enlightenment, of spiritual liberation, there are a lot of practices being done that I guess I would say are just very indirect and very, there are kinds of practices, like, in other words, because of the kind of inherent link between the idea of meditation and spiritual awakening, there's could be an assumption that, well, any meditation practice I take up might be taking me there. And it's sort of like, well, yeah, maybe, because everything we do kind of helps everything else, you know, and doing some therapy and doing some this, that, concentration practice, sure, it's all helping. But if our heart is burning with the possibility of touching the source, removing all the barriers between us and the ultimate and the sacred, if we really are wanting that, then I would argue we probably want to do a practice that's deeply in line with that possibility, and that's in a sense sourced from that possibility, even not as opposed. And so I'll give just maybe one simple concrete example. So spiritual awakening is one way of understanding it, is it's awakening to our true nature beyond the mind, that we have what in Buddhism is called a Buddha nature. This is a part of us. It's an already enlightened part of us that's all fully cooked. It's not something we need to develop bit by bit. It's not something that, we're gradually creating through certain techniques. It's something we're removing the veils, we're removing the obscuration so that this diamond essence within us can show up. So, okay, if that's your goal, and then now you do a practice where you're just, say, repeating a word over and over, a Sanskrit word or, an English word, doesn't matter. You're repeating something over and over to yourself quietly. Like, might that repetition of a word over and over do something that might ultimately someday help you awaken? Sure. Or, let's say you're going to just pay attention to your breath. Very common meditation practice, just pay attention to my breath. Might that do something that might someday help develop some capacity that opens that door to that higher nature? Sure. But what if you could do a practice where every time you meditate, the very practice itself is about clearing the obstacles and the obscurations, moving them to the side so that luminous essence of who we are can reveal itself in that very meditation practice. So in other words, there's no time involved, And this is where I said, in that quote, I said it's counter to almost every human instinct we have, because anytime we think about a goal, like spiritual awakening in this case, we invariably are going to think about that in terms of a process that leads to the goal, and that process is going to take place in time, and we're going to do things that eventually will get us there. But that very idea of time and a progress to get somewhere I'm not is the idea that's in the way of spiritual awakening. It's the biggest obstruction. So what if our practice took out any idea of a process in time that's leading me somewhere in the future, and instead we sat down, and from the very moment we begin to practice, where our intention and the practice itself is about, right now in this moment, I'm going to take up an inner posture, just like in yoga we do outer postures. I'm going to take up an internal posture that is fully aligned with my enlightened essence already. And in doing that, I'm going to just kick the door wide open for the always mysterious revelation of who I am beyond my mind and ego. I'm going to take up a posture in which the only part of me that could even do this practice is that essential part of me that's already awake to who I am. My ego can't do it because of the way it's designed. So I'll stop. I mean, I kind of laid out maybe like the whole theory of my whole teaching, but in a way, that's maybe a place to start on that.
Yeah, I think that was really a beautiful encapsulation. And yeah, you did touch on a lot of the bases, and it was very dear to my heart what you described, especially one phrase that you use, already here. Because most of the time we meditate to get something we don't have,
Right.
Or to get rid of something that we do have.
Mm-hmm.
But you said
Right.
We pull aside the veil. So what are the veils? I always think of them as basically as the thoughts about the past and the future.
So I think that's a good place to start, sort of past and, maybe not just, so thoughts, I would say maybe we could probably drill into that a little further than just thoughts about the past, but kind of like, just to kind of draw upon your framing, our relationship to the past and the future. So what is it about, because thinking about the past isn't inherently problematic. Like enlightened people think, the most enlightened person thinks about the past. They say, what did you do today? Oh, I had this for lunch. It's not inherently that having a past is a problem, but what's the unenlightened relationship to our past? Well, the ego structure, which is itself a big topic we could talk about, but at least in the way I use it and the way it's commonly spoke about in spiritual teachings, it's the part of us that's making a story about who we are, a fixed story of identity. I'm this kind of person. I have these qualities. I don't have these. I'm and it's different for each of us, but we have our little narrative of self, our self-concept. And that is where does that story come from? Our past. It's, every experience we have, we use to build up and fortify this edifice of a false self that's a narrative about who we are. And then the other big part of the ego is the emotional investment in defending that story of who we are. So we have I'm Craig, and I'm a great meditation teacher, and I'm also a really kind and caring human being, and I'm also whatever, and I'm not an idiot like those people who voted for the person I didn't vote for, and whatever. I've got I'm not saying that I'm like deeply embedded in that, but if we were to analyze whatever ego structure, just as an example, a person will have this set of ideas about the self drawn from their interpretation of their life history up to this point. And then the moment that gets challenged, like let's say I do something that is pretty idiotic and it gets pointed out, and it's revealed, wow, that was a terrible decision. The machinery inside us rushes in to try to defend my narrative that I'm this great smart, wise, enlightened person, it rushes in and says, well, that was an honest mistake and it wasn't your fault. And, you were given bad advice and, all this, the defense, ego defense. So, okay. So to just come back to the question. So if I'm sitting in meditation and my attention is basically still invested in defending that story, fortifying it. I'm thinking about the past and using it to populate my self-concept, then I'm definitely not opening to the infinite part of myself. So sure, that's the past. And the future, I mean, in a way, that's a little more something that I'm directly addressing in this approach to meditation, this direct approach, because I'm saying, okay, any part of us that's invested in getting somewhere other than we are in the future. So I've set up a goal. I want to be very enlightened, and it's going to take years, and I'm looking at that future goal. Well, what's happening when I'm sitting and meditating? I'm not putting every bit of my energy and life force and attention into this moment, because a lot of my attention's on some future moment. So it's like the investment in where I'm going and getting to in the future gets in the way of bringing it all here. I mean, I often will use the metaphor of investment and divestment around this and say, to really do this practice, can we divest every cent out of our investment into the future and basically put every penny we have on this moment of practice as the moment that I am choosing to be awake. And
I like that.
there's
I like
no
that
other
metaphor.
moment. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I like that metaphor. As somebody who's taken a couple of your courses and know you personally, you're a big proponent of what might be called direct awakening,
Yeah.
as opposed to kind of the almost like the spiritual stepladder approach, where you purify yourself over a lot of years. You do pranayama, you try to be a good person, you give to charity. A lot of what religion has done is set up a long system before you
Yeah.
might actually get somewhere. And the direct awakening is really a major change in how we look at things, that any person with the right technique and the right, what you call posture or container, might be able to touch upon their true nature anytime. And I'm wondering, there's obvious advantages to that. Saves a lot of time, energy, things like that. And I have benefited from that approach. I know Brian and a lot of our listeners have as well. But are there any disadvantages to this very direct approach to connecting with our true nature?
Yes, there are. And it's funny because my main meditation course is called The Practice of Direct Awakening. So we are talking about direct awakening completely. So, well, I mean, I probably wouldn't run around using the term disadvantages, but I get the spirit of what you're asking. So,
or maybe things to look out for that
exactly. Yeah,
lead you
no,
astray.
I got it. And certainly I could say even disadvantages, but here's what I'd say. I'd say, because you're right. So if we look at, I mean, and this isn't a new distinction. Even if you look even way back in some of the traditions, there were big arguments and debates about the sort of sudden schools of enlightenment in Buddhism versus the gradual schools of enlightenment.
Right.
And, some really powerful enlightened masters would say, no, you need to do this, develop your concentration first, and you need to do all the character development practices, like you said, and the self-purification of your motivations, so that you're only on the path for the right, highest possible reasons, you have discovered a truly selfless motivation to practice for the good of the whole, what they call the bodhisattva vow in Buddhism. And, you need all of that, because if you have an awakening and you haven't done all those things, you might be kind of empowering someone who's pretty undeveloped, fairly primitive, kind of a jerk still, fairly self-centered. And to some degree, the awakening, the powerful awakening might, clear away a lot of that, the detritus of your old, small self. But it also might end up, if your kind of ego takes hold of all that new power and clarity, you might become someone who's actually now very powerful, but doesn't have fully purified motivations and could really do harm as a teacher, because people might feel the power of your illumination and be drawn to you, but you still have shadow, you still have ego going on, you still have unwholesome motivation, you still have obscured vision, etc. And all of that now is empowered by some degree of kind of spiritual charge. So that was the idea in the kind of gradual schools. And then there were the sudden schools, which is, as you're kind of pointing out, I'm more in that category with my practice of direct awakening, that would say, well, but here's really the core distinction that I would try to make is, I think, sure, there's a kind of naive sudden school. And by the way, I pardon the nuance here, I'm sure some people, this might be not making reference to things that you're not aware of, but in the West, America and Europe, over the last, let's call it kind of 40 years, there's been a pretty powerful sudden school, meaning a lot of people teaching, in the satsang world, the Neo-Advaita Vedanta world, coming and saying, all you need to do is just realize who you are in this moment, and you are a liberated person now, and just give up the idea that you're not liberated, and then you're liberated. And that's all that's needed. And any practice, any meditation, anything you're doing is just in the way. It's just a belief that you're not there yet. Just do it. And so this has been a big part, had a lot of influence on contemporary spirituality, these kinds of ideas and these schools and these satsang teachers. And, interestingly enough, over time, a lot of that kind of dwindled and fizzled and didn't end up with a bunch of super powerfully enlightened people walking around, because it's nowhere near enough if that's the whole thing, that you're just trying to get that moment of insight. Sure, I'm not just saying that didn't catalyze awakenings for probably maybe hundreds of thousands of people. But I'm saying those awakenings didn't stabilize, and they didn't last, and they didn't change people's lives, because just having an insight, a spiritual insight of, oh, my true nature, oh, I'm already free, who I am beyond the mind, isn't at all sufficient for, in 99.999% of people, is not at all sufficient to catalyze real awakening. It might be the very rare people who have some stories from history. Ramana Maharshi, who just boom, had it, and that was the end. And he seemed to really be the end for him. But sorry, I want to get to the thread, because I haven't quite said what I wanted to say. But in the more mature sudden schools, and the school, really in the way I teach, and you'll find this in some of the Tibetan traditions, in the Mahamudra teachings and the Dzogchen teachings, the idea is more like awakening is available right now, and almost like the practice and the path begins with awakening, meaning let's not make the error of putting our potential for awakening, our awakened self, out somewhere in the future as a goal we have to gradually get to. Let's acknowledge the truth that it's right here, right now, that any person could, with the right pointing out instruction, the right words, and just insight, could see it and discover it and have the big aha of awakening. But then let's not also make the mistake of thinking that now is the end of the path. That's really the beginning of the path, in the way I teach, in some of these other kind of more what I would call more mature, sudden, direct schools. And what that means is, okay, now I'm actually aware of the goal. I'm aware of the goal in my own experience. I have tasted it. I'm not reading about it in a book. I'm not imagining it. It's part of me now. It's like the foundation for my practice. But I still have all this work to do to fully purify this vessel so that I can hold that awakening. I still probably have all kinds of erroneous ideas and beliefs that I need to cut through and see through. I still have all kinds of emotional reactivity, conditioned egoic emotional content that needs to be seen through, shadow material, like all of
Well, let me ask
the
you about that.
transformational work. Well, that was one second. Just all the transformational work needs to occur, but now it's being guided by the awakened vision, like by the awakened mind within us, and that changes the nature of it all, because it's like we're like practicing within a context of awakening. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Now, being that I'm somewhat familiar with your stuff and taking a couple courses, and you're really trying to teach a lot of people this, these pointing out instructions that lead to a direct experience. What do you do or is there a path in your teaching that also helps people with that, knowing their motivation or knowing the shadow material, or is that really left up for other teachings or aspects?
So yeah, but my teaching work at this point is comprised of sort of two main courses. There's
Mm-hmm.
this 12-week practice of direct awakening course that's mostly focused on meditation
Mm-hmm.
and awakening. And then I have a course called Integral Enlightenment, Awakening to an Evolutionary Relationship to Life, which delves much more into like understanding the nature of our own ego, both
Mm-hmm.
in general and specifically, and also learning how to, it's kind of taking some of the ideas I was just speaking about and really operationalizing them. Like, let's look at all the different parts of life, from our relationships to
Right.
just how we show up in the world, to our motivation, to our worldview and our belief systems, and what's fueling us, etc. And work through those. And the interesting thing is, I used to recommend taking the Integral Enlightenment course first, because I kind of wanted people to be anchored in this evolutionary kind of context. And then
Yeah.
I kind of flipped and thought, I need to have meditation be the anchor first. So, I mean, people come into my work in different ways. They're both, I don't exactly have it as a progression, but yeah, there's all of that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then I have an ongoing membership program called The Awakened Life that mostly focuses on meditation, but also each month we have practices to take into our lives to try to anchor it in
Uh-huh.
life. Yeah.
One of the things that originally attracted me to Brian was he's very good at coming up with very simple methods in his
Hmm.
books and in the podcast. And I found the same with you, that there's so many methods of direct awakening now, and
Hmm.
sometimes just a little turn of a phrase or a little something can make all the difference.
Right.
And
That's the nature of it. Yeah.
you would often come up with what you call pointing out instructions or phrases that would point. And I found, that one doesn't work. Yeah, that one doesn't work. Oh my God, that one works incredible.
Well, and to some degree, that's kind of how we all are. Is we're all at different places on the path. We all have different predilections, different ways of thinking, different orientations, different background, and I've often used the metaphor in the practice of direct awakening, where on the one hand, it's kind of just one simple practice. On the other, I teach it in at least 8 different ways that are distinct. And I'll say it's kind of like, well, once you're meditating, meaning once you're resting in your true nature, you're like on the freeway of meditation and everything's just flowing. But there are a lot of different on-ramps to getting on that freeway. And for
Yeah.
someone, it might be, just let everything be as it is right now in this moment. Don't change a thing. Try that. For someone else, it might be just bring your attention to the awareness that's having your experience right now, as opposed to the thing you're experiencing. And someone will say, I can't possibly do that. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone else will say, oh my God. So we're all at different points. Different practices are going to like open that door, because it's a subtle thing. Well, as opposed, and that's important for a direct awakening type teaching, because the goal here is it's unambiguous and it's very specific. Like, it's not just, oh yeah, we're just here to relax. We're just here to calm down. We're just here to focus. We're just here to, we're here to awaken, and that's a very specific thing, and it's either happening or it's not. And so let's try this. Okay, that didn't do it. Let's try this. Okay, yeah, okay, now you got it. Now see if you can hold that when you try this. And we eventually, once we're in meditation, all of the different practices make total sense, and they're all happening naturally. They're all happening simultaneously and naturally. But what gets us in, what opens that door at any moment, is very very unique, or kind of subjective, kind of personal.
Yeah, and I find it's not only different for different people, but even for me, it's different on different days.
Yes, right.
I might
Totally
try,
true.
just allowing everything to be as it is on one day, and then on another day, I might just try just being the background in which everything appears, and
Nice.
seeing
Yeah.
which one clicks that day.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I think in that book you mentioned, Unlocking the Power of Meditation, I talked about cross training as one. That was one of the chapters. Because we think about that in athleticism. Okay, great. You want to be a great runner, but to be like a world class runner, you're not going to only run for training. You're going to do some strength training. You're going to do some stretching. You're going to train some other capacities that will just enhance that. And I feel, again, this is, maybe you asked at the beginning, what are some of the errors that we make around meditation? Well, one error a lot of people make is they take up a practice, they do the exact same practice every day for years. And some days it's powerful, and other days it's boring, and other days they're falling asleep, and then sometimes it's rote, and then it's powerful again. But I really am a strong advocate of meditating in different ways regularly. Keep breaking it up, keep mixing it up. Try this. Okay, great. You love that. That always works for you. Okay, great. Now do something different and see what door that opens. Because even though I've said awakening is one thing, meditation is one thing, it actually has a lot of dimensions to it. And this is another kind of in that category of what are the kind of things we're getting wrong. A thing I see in a lot of people, and even in my teaching, where I'm making all the points that we're discussing right now, people will still they'll say, wow, I sit down and meditate. Doesn't matter which practice I do. I just get in. I get in. I get in meditation. I just get in my groove, and I'm kind of like, that's not what this is about. This is not about getting in this single state of consciousness that you're very familiar with, and you know how to get there. And then once you get there, you just rest. This is about really unearthing and, disrupting the momentum of thousands, hundreds of thousands, arguably millions of years of life evolution that's all around like holding on, security, certainty, knowing, predictability, control. We're disrupting all that momentum, and we have to keep disrupting it from different angles.
Yeah, I mean, if that state that you get to, if your happiness is conditioned on whether you're in that state or not,
There you go.
then there's something missing. And
Right.
and
Well said. Well
isn't
said.
that and it brings me to another question, which is related to the mistakes question earlier. But you had a great chapter in your book called "The Myth of the Quiet Mind," and
Mm,
I thought that was so important because, like, obviously everyone says you must quiet your mind, you must quiet your mind, and this is a theme in spiritual teaching over and over. And
yeah.
when I discovered, oh my gosh, that awareness that is my nature, that is totally allowing and loving, doesn't go away when my mind is active. It's still
Right.
there.
Right.
And
Beautiful. Yeah.
that was an eye-opener.
I love that. Let's all just take a moment and let that in. There was a transmission in that statement. He said that this deeper awakened essence of who I am, that maybe I had to kind of quiet my mind a little to discover it, maybe. But once it's discovered, nothing my mind could do could obscure that. That's who I am. That's the one who's experiencing the mind. And I'm not the mind, I'm the experiencer that's experiencing the mind. It's experiencing my emotions. It's experiencing this world moving, and this, profound experiencer, this pure subjectivity that I am, isn't touched, isn't it's not impacted by any of the changes going on in the world, in my mind, in my psyche, in my being. That's, that's a great statement of liberation. That's why it's called liberation. Oh, I'm free no matter what happens. My freedom is unconditional. My awakening is unconditional. My mind can be chaotic, it can be quiet, doesn't matter. But as you pointed out, that's an insight. That's not something you can just, oh, okay. Like now you heard me say it and now you're just going to adopt that truth and now your life's changed. It doesn't work. You have to do the practice for that revelation to occur. Yeah. And then just because it occurred once, it doesn't usually then just remain the obvious truth to you through every day, but this is why, even though I'm talking about direct awakening, I'm advocating practice, practice, practice of these postures, which, in a sense, what you just shared would be a great practice to just, okay, and I mean, and it is a practice I teach. It's probably what I'm talking about in that chapter, which is, okay, sit down to practice and don't fret about what your mind's doing. Don't make a problem out of anything your mind does. Don't try to change your mind. Don't try to control your mind. Let your mind do what it does as you sit there resting without reacting to it. Because if you can take up a posture of non-reactivity to the mind, then you start to realize who you are that's not the mind. And that then opens the door to a lot of the kind of beautiful kind of sentiment that you were sharing about that.
So many doorways. A lot of our listeners are pretty familiar with moments of their true nature or being awareness. And it seems like a lot of the next step is how you integrate that experience or those insights or that knowledge into one's life. And you do have a course that talks a little bit about that, but I'm wondering, do you recommend people do specific practices as integration, or how does that unfold?
Yeah, well, there's kind of two answers. So one is it's possible if you're really passionate and really interested in being awake. It's possible that just doing like profound meditation practice in the way we're talking about, taking up these inner postures that are deeply aligned with awakened awareness, such that awakened consciousness keeps showing up in your meditation and ultimately becomes the one that's meditating. And that's your true home, and you're doing those practices steadily in meditation. It's possible to then just walk into your life with a profound intention to live in alignment with these radical truths you're discovering about who and what you are, and to kind of bring an inquiry to your life that says, okay, if it's true that I don't have to control everything for things to work well, because that's one of the insights of our awakened nature, is that like life works much better when we let go and flow with it, and we're just remain in a kind of open, innocent, responsive place. And this is one of the ways that awakened consciousness shows up in life. It shows up as a kind of innocent, receptive, but responsive kind of presence. And we're here for it. We're not living in the stories about the past. We're not living in the hopes for the future. We're not trying to control where things go. We're more interested in like, well, where are they going? Where do they want to go? Where does, what's the field and the sort of entelechy or telos of evolutionary unfolding going here, and how do I follow that? And we can just, what I'm saying is it is possible for it all to become very organic, our kind of path of self-transcendence, self-purification, and really integration, as you use that term. That can be a very organic process if we're really heartfelt about our path. Also, though, I encourage, but it isn't necessarily going to be that way for many of us. We're not necessarily going to have that radical inquiry that is so driven and intentional that we're going to unlock the keys to our own integration and our own stabilization just because we're doing these deep meditation practices. And so, like I was mentioning in my Awakened Life meditation program, my membership program that just goes on month after month, where we keep doing the practices and exploring, I always give some practices for working with the same kind of analogous principle or awakened kind of principle in our daily life. Because I do think having practices to say, okay, I'm going to bring, so I just use the example of like letting go of control. Now, in meditation, that's something we can do absolutely. Like, that's one of the beautiful things about meditation. You're just sitting down. There are no consequences to letting go. So let go completely. Let go of everything. Let your mind wander, just no control, no attempt to get anywhere. Just be as you are. And if we can take that deeper and deeper and deeper, it's more and more profound, the illumination that comes from just being as I am, letting things be, no control. Now, I don't recommend people just go and do that unconditionally in their lives. Just go out today and just let everything be and don't do anything. I mean, nothing would happen. You wouldn't move. You wouldn't get out of a chair or out of bed because you're just, well, I'm just totally passive. So, but what's the practice that's kind of analogous in our lives? If most of us look at how we live our lives, we would easily see all kinds of ways that we are still living in fear, trying to over control things. And what would happen if what things should I let go of? And if we self-reflect from a conscious place, most of us can easily come up with a list just with ourselves. We don't need someone to tell us. We go, yeah, it's true. I'm over kind of controlling my partner, and I'm trying to there's too much fear around my this aspect of my work, and I'm neurotic about this. And what if I just practice releasing those things, and again aligned with the meditative awareness that I've discovered and the deeper illumination, I'm working with that insight and bringing it into my life in a way that works in life, which is again not total but analogous, and letting it flow, because it's kind of like all the daily life practices. The goal of those two is to bring insight and illumination that will then lead to change, as opposed to like, what I mean by that is, it's not as opposed to we're just trying to get good at doing them. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, I'm not saying, oh, go and let go of control because you want to get good at letting go of control. I'm saying go practice letting go of control because it's going to reveal to you something about the nature of your ego and why it's clinging for control, why you want to know everything in advance, why you need to be able to predict what's going to happen before you act. It's, because doing that practice will show you in yourself, if you're interested, what's really in your way of embodying that profound liberation that you've tasted in your meditation.
Yeah. Got it. Where are you thinking, Brian?
Well, I think that's wonderful, and it is about embodying, and it is about bringing the understanding into our lives. Because if we're a jerk in our lives, or if we're controlling everybody, or if we're unhappy, or if any of these things, I mean, what good is it? A lot of the teachers, some of them that you mentioned before, are saying this has no effect on the self, and I haven't actually found that to be true.
Right. That's a good example of this kind of false Southern school that became so popular in the West. That was one of the tenets.
Yeah.
Let's separate the personality and behavior and character from awakening. I'm kind of like, what? Awakening only shows up as transformed behavior, personality, and character. But go ahead.
Thank you.
I don't want to
No,
interrupt you.
that's it. That's it. What I wanted to say, and there is about that. But there is one other question that I did have, which is kind of a theme that I've noticed runs through your work, which you've talked about in various ways. But I think that one of the best ways was when here's a quote, when you said, the ego has been radically overridden by the ultimate principle, by the creative force of the cosmos. And this is something that is a little hard to get a grasp on, because is it part of us, or is it outside of us, or how do we get connected to it, and what are the nuances of of that, or bringing, as you said, bringing our life into alignment with the sacred perfection?
Mm. Well, your question really, for me, brings up the whole theme of radical surrender. So, so surrender is it's a almost universal spiritual principle. You find it in all the religions in some form, right? Even the very, theistic, I'm surrendering my will to the divine will. Right? It's a theistic metaphor, kind of from the Western teachings. In the East, more would be a bit more typical that it was like, there's the way, and I'm going to surrender to the way, not my way. I've got my agenda, I got my beliefs about how things go, but I want to discover the way so that I can surrender to the way, so I can follow the way unconditionally. Or there was the word dharma, which kind of meant law. It was like, there's a law to the cosmos. There's a way to be. There's a way to live that I want to get out of the way so that I can follow the law. So we kind of have the law, the way, God's will showing up throughout the mystical and religious traditions. And so nowadays, often, again, in kind of some of the erroneous interpretations of these ideas that have proliferated in the West, often people think of surrender just as like, well, surrender means you just let what happens happen, and stop trying to, stop arguing with life. In other words, the core error is the idea that somehow what's happening is what's meant to happen, or like what's happening is already an expression of God's will, some people will say. And so just trust what's happening. Just let what's happening happen, and stop fighting with reality, because it's what's happening, and that is God's will. Okay, so I would humbly say that is total nonsense. and this whole, like, the idea of God's will, or the Dharma, or the way, is that there is a way. There's a way to live. There's a way to be that's in harmony with the cosmic order. There's a way to show up in each moment that is in profound alignment. And then there's not doing that and being out of alignment with the way. And if we look at what's happening in this world, most human behavior, like, again, some 90 whatever percent of it, is totally not in alignment with the cosmic principle, the ultimate reality. It's not in alignment with our highest potential. People are not living an expression of pure love. They're not living in radical alignment with truth. We're all, this is why the world's so messed up. So if we kind of say, well, this horrible, tragic, crazy, messed up world is just, that's God's will, and it's how it's supposed to be, and surrendering means you just like accept it. You just accept the world's, that's not, I don't think that's ever what it meant. And it's definitely not what I mean by it. What I mean by it is we can awaken to the way, the Dharma, the law, the truth. Meaning clear, and to just maybe bring it down to a very secular way of looking at that. Let's just call it clear seeing of the greater good, if we want to really despiritualize the whole thing and say we can come into, if we can remove, awaken beyond our 100 plus cognitive biases and our, dozen plus ego defenses and all the things that radically obscure our perception of what's happening. And we can let go of our imposition of our seeing and our agenda and our personal, will on reality, then we have a chance of starting to see what's actually happening here and of what's actually possible here. And an awakened way of living, to me, is living in alignment with our higher possibilities and being someone who's trying to bring them into existence in ourselves, in those around us, in the organizations we're a part of, in the communities we're involved with. We're a force of higher positive evolution of humanity towards its higher spiritual potentials. And so in that quote where you said, I can't remember how it was, where like the ego, like ultimately the ego has been kind of overridden by a greater power, however I said that. what I'm saying is when we really discover how to surrender our own story, our own agenda, our own will, and like let ourselves be taken over by this glorious, profound force of love and truth that is trying in every moment to take us over. It's trying everything. People think, oh, I wish God would show up and help me. God is trying so hard to help you. God is trying so hard to take over your life, but we have evolved a structure that's a defense against that. It's a defense against that radical letting go, that radical submission, that willingness that says, thy will, not my will. The greater good, not my personal agenda. And I'm going to give my life to that and let that guide me. And to the degree that then starts to take us over, what happens is we're then confronted with, oh, well, there's all these little parts of me that don't want to do that. I don't want it. I want to do my thing. I don't want, I can see the right thing to do right now would be to defer to some other agenda and need. There's a greater need than my personal, agenda. I can see that'd be the right thing, but I don't want to because I want what I want, and I'm afraid. I have fear. I have, and so that's the radical path of self-purification. Now really begins because we're in touch with the way. We're in touch with the Dharma. It's like alive in us. It's also been called the spiritual heart. This capacity of knowing and being in touch, or the spiritual conscience that kind of senses the way, knows how we should be living and aligning, but doesn't want, and now this is what they call the great inner jihad in Sufism. It's the battle for the soul, for the soul's liberation to come into alignment, in that case with Allah, but, as like, again, this ultimate principle. But, to the degree that we're willing to follow the truth we've seen, the deeper knowing we've discovered, this way that's been revealed itself in our heart, to the degree that we're willing to surrender to the heart in that sense, then that starts to take us over. And the experience becomes, I'm not really living this. I'm not doing this anymore. Something much deeper has like taken over this human vessel. And that's now the source of my life and my actions. And that's like the center of my inquiry and my path. And there's a kind of intense humility that comes online at that point, where we never assume that we're seeing clearly. We never assume we've got it right. We never assume we're enlightened. In many ways, the most enlightened people will not run around going, I'm so enlightened, because they kind of know, well, this is a very subtle thing that's gonna, I'm enlightened today, but I could totally not be tomorrow. I could totally screw up. I think it was attributed to the Buddha. I don't know where and if he said this, but they said when the Buddha was asked, how can you know if someone's fully enlightened? He said, you'd have to wait till the very end of their life and they had breathed their last breath and then scrutinize every action up to that point. And then you could see, because otherwise there might be some obscuration, some error, some lingering, erroneous belief, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just, this is a very subtle thing. It's not, there's a lot of glibness today around, oh yeah, just wake up. You're just gonna, just know it, see it, do it, be it, whatever. Yet it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah. It's very subtle each moment too.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that people get a little bit of experiential taste of your approach, because I found it very helpful. And I think now would be a good time to maybe guide us in a version of your direct awakening, what that might look like, and then we come back and make a comment on that. Does that sound good?
Sounds wonderful.
Okay.
I'm ready to meditate. Okay. So I just want to invite all of us now to you can do this with your eyes open or closed. If you have them open, I would encourage you to just let your gaze rest somewhere, looking down at the floor, the rug, the furniture, whatever, and just let go of what you're seeing. And I just want to invite us all in this moment to let go of all the thoughts and ideas we've been discussing. We've covered a lot of ground. There's probably insights, arguments with what's been said, whatever, all the, the things a mind naturally does. And just kind of let all that drop to the side and bring your attention to the field of awareness that's here between all of us listening right now. We've been talking about some very heightened spiritual realizations and truths. And some of that's probably vibrating in your experience, some sense of elevation, expansion, peace, clarity. Just notice what's arising in the field of your awareness, and notice what's arising in our collective awareness. Notice that that's the same thing. There's really just one consciousness we're all partaking in. Notice that all the content of your own experience right now, thoughts might be present, feelings, sensations. Notice that none of the content affects your ability to be aware of the awareness that you are right now. You are this vast, open, spacious awareness, and all of us are this vast, open, spacious awareness. And there's room within this vastness for anything that could arise, for all of your feelings, all the feelings of everyone in this group. And when I say group, I want to clarify, I mean everyone listening to this podcast at any moment, because a field gets created around an encounter like this that transcends time and space, and the field of all of us tuning in is always here. And now I want to invite you to take the radical step of simply allowing your experience in this moment to be exactly as it is, with no attempt to change it in any way. Whatever you're experiencing, just let it be. Just be as you are. Nothing needs to change about the content of your mind. Whatever feelings and sensations you're experiencing are welcome here. There's no attempt to get anywhere else other than this moment. Letting things be means letting things change. Our experience invariably shifts from one moment to the next. Sometimes our mind is quiet. Sometimes it's active. Sometimes we have strong feelings. Sometimes our feelings recede. We just let those changes occur with no attempt to control the direction of our meditation. We're just being, simply being as we are, and letting life unfold through us. Now allow yourself to gently begin to let go of the meditation, but not in a way where we're closing the door on what's happening. We just allow it to continue naturally in our experience, allow it to flow into our life in whatever way it does, not trying to hold on to any insights or states, but also not actively trying to shift into something we might think of as ordinary consciousness. Allow the extraordinary sublime consciousness that you already are to just carry on into the next moment. Open, receptive, available, free.
So it's nice to go from words to being.
Mm. Yeah.
I love the
Thank you
way you
for that.
ended that with the sense that meditation isn't ending, it's just continuing. This like this word popped into my head. Hey, stick around. Talking to
Yeah.
that
No need
well,
to.
talking to me, my nature, the
Right.
awareness.
Well, right. Because, and again, the intention there is that often we kind of think, okay, I'm doing my meditation. Okay, now I'm leaving my meditation. I'm going back to my regular self.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe the meditation has some things it wants to wants to show you and bring into your life. And if we're doing a lot of practice, often the revelations and insights from the practice happen outside of practice. Many people who do a lot of practice and have had awakenings will say, well, the awakening didn't happen during meditation. It happened one day when I was just on a walk. And then everything fell away and revealed some radical other dimension of being. Wow. So we want to remain open to where the illumination, wherever it's going to come from.
And as you've said, it's potentially in every second in our subtle shift from control to surrender, from being in the world in a doing manner versus connecting with our true nature. And it's a very subtle stuff. The more ideas, more phrases, more pointing instructions we have, the more likely we're going to trip over it more and more.
Nice. Yeah, I would totally resonate with that.
Where can people find out about your work, Craig?
Well, my website is craighamiltonglobal.com, and on there you can download or tune in, or you can download the ebook that Brian mentioned, Unlocking the Power of Meditation. You can sign up for my Meditation 2.0 webinar and kind of get a deeper dive, kind of workshop on all of this. All of that's for free. I also want to promote my podcast, which just passed its 1-year anniversary, Meditation Changes Everything. So you can find
Uh-huh.
that on any podcast platform. Meditation Changes Everything. And yeah, I've all the courses are up on my site, and you can sign up for those anytime. And hope to connect with some of your listeners in those contexts.
Great. Any last words, Brian?
No, I'm so grateful to all that we covered in such depth and I think, beautifully described and fascinating. So just thank you. I'm very grateful that you are here, and I'm so looking forward to our listeners sharing this.
And just on a personal note,
Thank
I
you.
took your courses, and now we've spent some time together, which has been really sweet. And some meditation teachers, they can come off as a little stuffy or something. But one of the things I really appreciate about you is you're just a fun guy, and
You're a fun guy
realize,
too.
and that's important. That the goal is not to be very I don't know, spiritual, holy, but to enjoy your life and to be yourself and to be free of some of the obstacles that tend to get in our way and keep us from really connecting with our true being.
Beautifully said. Yeah. Well, I'm enjoying getting to know you, and think you're a fun guy too, and happy to see this spirit living in both you guys. It's been a wonderful dialogue, and I really appreciate you having me on here, and look forward to doing it again before too long.
Sounds good.
Fun.
And to our listeners, the instruction, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Keep exploring. All right.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.